The morning sun cast long shadows across the mining colony of Kepler 442b when the transport ships arrived. Dr. Kim Tae-ho looked up from his research station and felt his blood turn cold. These were not the regular supply ships they were expecting. These were military vessels, black and silent against the orange sky. Inside one of those ships, something stirred in the darkness. The Vorthak opened its glowing yellow eyes for the first time. 12 feet of pure muscle and armor it had been, created for one purpose only: to kill, to destroy, to never stop until everything that moved was dead. The creature's bio-neural processors came online with a soft hum. Information flooded its mind. Target location, mission parameters, rules of engagement. There were no rules, only destruction. The Vorthak flexed its massive claws and felt the razor edges slice through the air. Perfect, deadly, ready. Down in the colony, life continued as normal. Children ran through the streets while their parents worked in the mines or tended to the vertical farms. The settlement housed over 3,000 beings from a dozen different species. Humans worked alongside tall blue centaurians and small, furry Kalari. They had built something beautiful here, something peaceful. Dr. Kim Tae-ho was one of the few humans who studied alien creatures for a living. His laboratory was filled with specimens and data files about every known species in the galaxy. His wife Yoon Mira managed the colony's daily operations from the central administration building. Their 8-year-old son Kang Do-hyun was supposed to be in school, but he had snuck into his father's lab again to read about alien animals. The boy loved creatures of all kinds. He would spend hours reading about their behaviors, their pack structures, their communication methods. His father often joked that Do-hyun understood animals better than most adults understood other people. The child had a gift, though nobody knew how special that gift truly was. The first sign of trouble came when the communication arrays went silent. Mira frowned at her control panel as screen after screen went dark. The orbital defense platforms stopped responding. The early warning system showed nothing but static. Then the transport ship doors opened. The Vorthak stepped onto the surface of Kepler 442b and breathed deeply. Its enhanced senses immediately cataloged every living thing. Within a 5-mile radius, 3,047 heartbeats, 3,047 targets. The creature's lips pulled back in what might have been a smile if it had been capable of joy. But the Vorthak felt nothing except the burning need to complete its mission. It began to walk toward the colony with slow, measured steps. Each footfall left deep impressions in the hard-packed earth. The creature was in no hurry. It had all day to kill everything that lived here, maybe longer if it wanted to be thorough. The first patrol to encounter the Vorthak was a mixed group of Centaurian, guards and human security officers. They were making their usual rounds when they saw the massive figure approaching from the landing zone. Commander Rix Valton, a veteran Centaurian with 30 years of military experience, raised his weapon and called out a challenge. "Halt and identify yourself." The Vorthak looked at the small group of armed beings and tilted its massive head to one side. Then it moved. Faster than something so large should have been able to move. One moment it was 50 yards away. The next moment Commander Valton was flying through the air, his weapon torn from his hands. The creature's claws swept through the patrol like a harvester through wheat. The bioarmor that covered its body deflected every shot. The energy weapons that could punch holes through starship hulls left only small scorch marks on its hide. Within 30 seconds the patrol was gone, and the Vorthak continued its methodical advance toward the colony proper. Emergency sirens began to wail across the settlement. Families grabbed emergency supplies and headed for the evacuation shelters. Parents called for their children. Workers abandoned their posts and ran for the underground tunnels that connected the residential areas. Dr. Kim received the emergency alert while he was examining tissue samples in his laboratory. His hands shook as he read the preliminary reports. Some kind of bioweapon had been deployed against the colony. Initial casualty reports were catastrophic. He immediately tried to contact his wife and son. Mira was already coordinating the evacuation from the administration center when her husband's call came through. Her voice was steady, but he could hear the fear underneath. "Tae-ho, You need to get to the evacuation point now. Take Do-hyun and get underground. Where is he? Is he safe? He should be at school, but the building is being evacuated. All the children are being moved to the deep shelters. But Do-hyun was not at school. He was still in his father's laboratory, hidden under a desk reading about pack behavior in predatory species. The emergency sirens meant danger, but the boy was more curious than frightened. He had pulled up his father's research files on bioweapons and was trying to understand what kind of creature could cause such panic. The main defensive line formed at the colony's outer perimeter. Every able-bodied person with military training took position behind hastily constructed barriers. Energy weapons powered up with high-pitched whines. Heavy artillery units tracked toward the approaching threat. The Vorthak walked straight through their defensive line as if it did not exist. Explosions bloomed around the creature but did not slow it down. Energy beams that could melt steel plates left only faint marks on its bioarmor. The Vorthak did not dodge or take cover. It simply continued walking forward while death rained down around it. When it reached the defensive line, the real slaughter began. The creature moved through the defending forces like a natural disaster made flesh. Its claws cut through battle armor as if it were paper. Its massive strength sent soldiers flying through the air like broken dolls. Some of the defenders tried to retreat in good order. Others broke and ran in panic. It made no difference to the Vorthak. It hunted down every fleeing figure with mechanical precision. The creature's enhanced senses could track a heartbeat from a mile away. There was nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. As the sun reached its highest point in the alien sky, smoke began to rise from the outer districts of the colony. The Vorthak worked its way inward, destroying everything in its path. Buildings collapsed under its assault. Vehicles exploded when its claws raked across their power cells. By late afternoon, the creature had systematically eliminated half the colony's population. The survivors huddled in the deep shelters and prayed to whatever gods they worshipped that the nightmare would pass them by. But the Vorthak was just getting started. As darkness fell across Kepler 442b, the creature turned, its glowing yellow eyes toward the residential sector where the families lived, where children hid in their bedrooms and parents whispered desperate prayers, where 8-year-old Kang Do-hyun sat alone in his father's laboratory, reading about creatures that could not be stopped, and slowly beginning to understand what was coming for them all. The second day brought no mercy to the survivors of Kepler 442b. The Vorthak had spent the night methodically destroying the industrial sector, its glowing eyes cutting through the darkness like twin sons of death. When dawn broke over the ruined colony, the creature stood among the twisted wreckage of mining equipment and processing plants, utterly untouched by the night of destruction. Commander Rix Valton crawled out from under a collapsed building, his blue Centaurian skin marked with cuts and burns. His left arm hung useless at his side, but his eyes still burned with determination. Around him, the scattered remains of the Colonial Defense Force gathered what weapons they could find. 17 soldiers out of over 200. It was all that remained of their organized resistance. "We hit it with everything we had," muttered Sergeant Torres, a human woman whose helmet had been cracked down the middle. Plasma cannons, fusion charges, railgun rounds, nothing even slowed it down. Valton checked his sidearm and found only 3 energy charges left. Not that it mattered. The creature's bioarmor had proven immune to their strongest weapons. But giving up was not in his nature. If they were going to die, they would die fighting. "The thing has to have a weakness," he said, though his voice carried little conviction. "Everything biological has a weakness." In the underground tunnel system, beneath the residential quarter, Park Hye-jin was leading a group of 23 children toward the evacuation ships. The human teacher had volunteered to stay behind when the first wave of evacuations began, unwilling to abandon the youngest colonists. Now she regretted that choice as she heard the sound of destruction drawing closer overhead. The children came, from 6 different species, but they all looked equally terrified. Well, almost all of them. 7-year-old Lee Jinwoo walked beside her with curious eyes instead of fearful ones. The small human boy had been asking questions since they entered. "The tunnels. Miss Park, why doesn't the monster listen when people tell it to stop? Because it's not really an animal, Jinwoo. It's a weapon made to look like an animal. But all animals listen if you talk to them the right way. My grandfather taught me that. Park Hye-jin wished she could share the boy's innocent faith, but she had seen the security footage. The creature showed no more emotion than a machine. It killed with the cold efficiency of a computer program. The group reached a junction where 3 tunnels met. Park checked her map and chose the path that led toward the spaceport. Behind them, the sounds of collapsing buildings grew louder. The Vorthak was working its way through the colony like a methodical plague. Dr. Kim Tae-ho had spent the night in his laboratory, desperately searching through his research files for anything that might help. His expertise in alien biology was extensive, but he had never encountered anything like the Vorthak. The creature seemed to combine the worst aspects of a dozen different predatory species. His analysis of the security footage revealed disturbing details. The creature's movements were too precise to be purely instinctual. Its bioneural processors were constantly learning and adapting. Every attack it survived made it stronger and smarter, but there was something else in the data that puzzled him. Brief moments when the creature seemed to pause as if listening for something. During these pauses, the bioluminescent markings on its hide would shift from aggressive red to a softer amber color. What was it waiting for? Dr. Kim's research into precursor artifacts had taught him that the ancient race built command hierarchies into all their creations. Could the Vorthak be programmed to respond to some kind of authority signal? The problem was that all known precursor command codes had been lost millions of years ago. His communication device buzzed with an incoming message from his wife. Mira's voice was strained but steady. "Tae-ho, the evacuation ships can't get through. The creature destroyed the landing pads and the control towers. We're trapped here. What about the underground shelters? They won't hold forever. The thing seems to know exactly where we are. It's like it can sense us through solid rock." Dr. Kim felt his heart sink. The Vorthak's enhanced senses were far beyond anything in nature. It could probably detect heartbeats and breathing patterns from incredible distances. There truly was nowhere to hide. "Where is Do-hyun?" "I don't know. He wasn't with the other children when they were evacuated from the school. The teacher thinks he might have gone back to your lab." Dr. Kim looked around his empty laboratory with growing panic. If his son was here, where was he hiding? He began, searching through every possible hiding spot, calling Do-hyun's name softly. Meanwhile, the Vorthak had finished with the industrial district and was moving into the commercial zone. The creature's massive form cast long shadows as it walked between the abandoned shops and restaurants. Its yellow eyes scanned constantly, searching for any sign of life. A movement caught its attention. A small Kalari shopkeeper was trying to sneak between buildings carrying a bag of supplies. The furry alien made it almost 50 yards before the Vorthak's claws found him. The creature showed no more emotion during the kill than a farmer harvesting grain. Commander Valton and his remaining soldiers had set up an ambush in the central plaza. They waited in the ruins of the fountain that had once been the colony's pride, their weapons trained on the approach routes. When the Vorthak came into view, they opened fire with everything they had. The creature paused for a moment as energy beams struck its bioarmor. Then it began to move toward them with that terrifying fluid grace. Valton's men scattered, but the Vorthak was faster. It leaped impossible distances and struck with devastating precision. Sergeant Torres managed to fire a rocket directly into the creature's chest at point-blank range. The explosion would have destroyed a building, but the Vorthak simply stepped through the smoke and flames, completely unharmed. Its claws found the sergeant a second later. Valton was the last one left. He emptied his weapon into the creature's face, then drew his combat knife for a final desperate charge. The Vorthak caught him almost gently, like picking up a child. For a moment, the commander thought he saw something in those glowing eyes. Not malice or hunger, just cold mechanical purpose. The creature dropped his broken body and continued toward the residential quarter. In the tunnels below, Park Hye-jin heard the explosion from the plaza. She knew what it meant. The last organized resistance was gone. She gathered the children closer and tried to think of new options, but there were none left. Young Lee Jinwoo tugged at her sleeve. Miss Park, I think I know why the monster won't listen. Why is that, Jinwoo? Because nobody is talking to it. In the right language. Animals all have their own special language. My grandfather taught me some of them. The teacher looked down at the earnest 7-year-old and felt her heart break. If only it were that simple. If only childhood innocence could solve what military might could not. Above them, the Vorthak entered the residential district. Its enhanced senses detected hundreds of heartbeats hiding in the buildings around it. So many targets. So little time. The creature began its work with methodical patience. Building by building, room by room, it would find them all. In his father's laboratory, 8-year-old Kang Do-yoon finally heard his name being called. He crawled out from under the desk where he had been reading about pack hierarchies and predator behavior. His father swept him up in a desperate hug. Do-yoon, we have to go. Right now. But as they reached the laboratory door, they heard a sound that made them both freeze. Footsteps, heavy, measured footsteps coming down the corridor outside. The Vorthak had found them. The footsteps in the corridor outside the laboratory grew louder with each passing second. Dr. Kim Tae-ho held his 8-year-old son close, feeling the boy's small heart beating rapidly against his chest. There was nowhere to run. The laboratory had only one exit, and the Vorthak was between them and freedom. Through the thin walls, they could hear the creature moving from room to room with terrifying patience. Doors were torn from their frames with metallic shrieks. Furniture was tossed aside like toys. The monster was searching for something, and it would not stop until it found what it was looking for. In the residential building across the street, the Choi family huddled in their bathroom. Min-suk had barricaded the door with everything he could find, but he knew it would not matter. Through their window, they had watched the creature tear apart the building next door. The Vorthak's claws cut through reinforced walls like they were made of paper. His wife Sunny held their twin daughters close, whispering soft lullabies to keep them calm. The girls were only 5 years old, too young to understand why Mommy and Daddy looked so scared. They thought it was just another game, like hide and seek. The sound of splintering wood came from downstairs. The Vorthak had entered their building. 3 blocks away, Park Hyejin led her group of children through the maintenance tunnels that ran beneath the colony. The passages were narrow and dark, lit only by emergency lighting that cast strange shadows on the walls. The children stayed close, together holding hands in a long chain so no one would get lost. Young Lee Jinwoo was still thinking about the monster upstairs. His grandfather had been a farmer back on Earth, and he had taught the boy many things about animals. How to read their body language, how to speak to them without words, how to show respect to creatures that were bigger and stronger than you. Miss Park, he whispered, what if the monster isn't really mean? What if it's just scared and confused? The teacher looked down at the earnest 7-year-old. Even now, in the face of certain death, the boy was trying to find goodness in a creature designed for killing. Some things are born bad, Jinwoo. This is one of them. But my grandfather said there are no bad animals, only animals that don't understand what people want from them. Park Hyejin wished she could share the child's faith, but she had seen the security footage. The Vorthak killed with mechanical precision. There was no confusion or fear in those glowing eyes, only cold purpose. The tunnel ahead branched into 3 directions. She checked her map and chose the path that led toward the emergency shelters. Behind them, she could hear the muffled sounds of destruction as the creature worked its way through the residential district building by building. Back in the laboratory, Dr. Kim was running through options in his mind. All of them ended badly. The Vorthak was less than 50 feet away now, moving through the research complex with slow deliberation. Soon it would reach their door, and then it would be over. But his son Do-hyun seemed strangely calm. The boy had spent the last 2 days reading his father's research files, absorbing information about alien behavior patterns and predator psychology. His young mind was processing the data in ways that adult thinking could not match. Dad, Do-hyun whispered, the monster isn't killing people because it wants to. It's killing people because it has to. What do you mean? It's like the worker. Bees in your files. They don't choose to make honey. They just do it because that's what they're programmed to do. Dr. Kim looked at his son with surprise. The boy had grasped something that escaped most adults. The Vorthak wasn't evil or cruel. It was simply following its programming. But that didn't make it any less dangerous. The footsteps stopped right outside their door. For a long moment, everything was silent. Dr. Kim could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. Do-hyun remained perfectly still, as if he was listening for something. Then the door exploded inward. The Vorthak filled the doorway like a living nightmare, 12 feet of muscle and bioarmor, its yellow eyes scanning the laboratory with mechanical precision. Those eyes found Dr. Kim and his son immediately. The creature stepped into the room, its massive head nearly touching the ceiling. Up close, Dr. Kim could see details that the security footage had missed. The bioluminescent markings that pulsed along its hide in complex patterns. The way its nostrils flared as it analyzed their scent. The subtle movements of its head as it processed audio and visual data. Dr. Kim pushed his son behind him and raised his hands in a futile gesture of surrender. "Please," he said, though he knew the creature could not understand human speech. "He's just a child." The Vorthak tilted its massive head to one side, studying them both, its claws extended to their full length, razor edges gleaming in the laboratory's artificial light. Those claws had torn through military armor and reinforced walls. Human flesh would offer no resistance at all, but something made the creature pause. Do-hyun stepped out from behind his father. The 8-year-old boy looked up at the monster that towered above him, showing no fear at all. His dark eyes met the creature's glowing gaze with calm curiosity. "You don't want to hurt us," the boy said softly. "I can see it in your eyes." The Vorthak's bioluminescent pattern shifted from aggressive red to confused amber. Its head tilted, further to the right, like a dog trying to understand a complex command. Dr. Kim watched in amazement as his son approached the creature. Everything he knew about biology told him that this should be impossible. Predators did not hesitate when, faced with prey. Weapons did not pause when given targets, but the Vorthak was doing both. "Do-hyun, get back," Dr. Kim whispered. The boy ignored his father and took another step toward the monster. "You're not happy doing this, are you? Killing all these people. It makes you sad inside." The creature's breathing changed, the steady rhythm became irregular, almost like panting. Its massive chest rose and fell in patterns that suggested emotional distress rather than physical exertion. In the tunnels below, Park Hee-jin and her children had reached the emergency shelter entrance. But the heavy blast doors were sealed shut, their electronic locks flashing red warning lights. The shelter's automated systems had detected the bioweapon above and gone into lockdown mode. No one could get in or out. "Miss Park," said a small Kalari girl named Fuzz, "are we going to die?" The teacher knelt down to the child's level. She wanted to lie, to offer false hope, but she had always believed in telling children the truth. "I don't know, sweetheart, but whatever happens, we're going to stay together." Lee Jinwoo tugged at her sleeve again. "Miss Park, what if someone tried to talk to the monster the way my grandfather talked to angry bulls?" "How did your grandfather talk to angry bulls, Jinwoo?" "He didn't shout or run away. He just stood very still and spoke in a calm, strong voice. He said you had to show the bull that you weren't afraid, but you also weren't trying to fight. You had to be like the leader of the herd." Park Hye-jin felt a spark of desperate hope. It was crazy, but no crazier than hiding in tunnels while death stalked the colony above. Back in the laboratory, Do-hyun was now standing directly in front of the Vorthak. The boy barely came up to the creature's knee, but he showed no sign of intimidation. His small hand reached out slowly, palm up, in the universal gesture of peaceful contact. "It's okay," he said in that same soft, calm voice. "Nobody taught you how to be happy. They only taught you how to kill, but you can learn new things. I can teach you." The Vorthak's claws retracted slightly. Its breathing steadied into a more normal rhythm. The bioluminescent patterns on its hide continued to shift between amber and blue, as if its internal systems were fighting some kind of conflict. Dr. Kim watched his son with growing amazement. The boy was communicating with the creature on some level that transcended language. Not through words, but through tone, body language, and something deeper. Something instinctual. The creature lowered its massive head until its glowing eyes were level with Do-hyun's face. For a moment, boy and monster regarded each other in perfect silence. Then, for the first time since its awakening, the Vorthak made a sound that was not a roar or a growl. It was a soft, questioning whine, like a lost animal seeking guidance. Do-hyun smiled and placed his tiny hand on the creature's armored snout. "There," he said gently. "Now you're starting to remember who you really are." The moment stretched between boy and beast like a bridge across an impossible gulf. Do-hyun's small hand rested on the Vorthak's armored snout, and for the first time since its creation, the creature felt something other than the burning need to kill. The sensation was strange and uncomfortable, like trying to remember a dream after waking. Dr. Kim Tae-ho watched in stunned silence as his 8-year-old son did something that an entire military force had failed to accomplish. He was communicating with humanity's greatest nightmare. More than that, he was changing it somehow. The Vorthak's bioluminescent patterns continued to shift through the spectrum, cycling from aggressive red to confused amber to something that looked almost like peaceful blue. Its massive head remained perfectly still under Do-hyun's touch, but its yellow eyes seemed to be searching the boy's face for answers to questions it had never known how to ask. In the residential building across the street, the Choi family heard the sounds of destruction stop. Min-seok pressed his ear to the bathroom door, listening for any sign of movement in the hallway outside. Everything had gone quiet. "Maybe it left," his wife Sunny whispered hopefully. But Min-seok knew better. The creature had been working its way through the colony with methodical precision for 2 days. It did not stop until its work was complete. The silence was somehow more terrifying than the sounds of violence had been. In the tunnels below, Park, Heejin and her children waited by the sealed emergency shelter. The teacher kept checking her chronometer, though she was not sure why. Time seemed meaningless when death was stalking the colony above. Young Lee Jinwoo had been unusually quiet for the past few minutes. The 7-year-old boy was thinking about something his grandfather had told him years ago, back when they lived on the family farm on Earth. "Miss Park," he said suddenly, "my grandfather once told me that every animal has a secret name. Not the name people give them, but the name they give themselves inside their hearts." "That's a beautiful story, Jinwoo." He said if you can figure out an animal's secret name and say it the right way, they have to listen to you. Even the meanest, scariest animals. Park Hye-jin looked down at the earnest boy. Even in their desperate situation, his innocent wisdom touched something deep in her heart. "What do you think the monster's secret name might be?" Jinwoo thought about it seriously. "I think maybe its secret name is something sad, like lost or forgotten or lonely." Back in the laboratory, Do-hyun was still standing face to face with the Vorthak. The boy's young mind was processing everything he had learned from his father's research files. Pack hierarchies, alpha behaviors, dominance displays, communication patterns in predatory species. But more than that, he was drawing on something deeper, some instinctive understanding that seemed to come from his very genes. He knew, without knowing how he knew, that this creature was waiting for something, searching for something, needing something it had never received. "You're not just a weapon," Do-hyun said softly. "You're a person trapped inside a weapon's body. Somebody made you forget who you really are, but I can help you remember." The Q. Vorthak's breathing changed again. The mechanical rhythm became more natural, more like the breathing patterns of living creatures rather than bioengineered killing machines. Its massive chest rose and fell in sync with some internal struggle between programmed purpose and awakening consciousness. Dr. Kim recognized what was happening, though he could barely believe it. The creature's bio-neural processors were adapting in real time, creating new pathways and connections. His son was somehow triggering dormant subroutines. In the Vorthak's consciousness matrix, Do-hyun took a step back and looked up at the towering creature with complete confidence. When he spoke again, his voice carried an authority that seemed impossible for an 8-year-old child. It was the voice of someone born to command, someone whose genetic heritage stretched back through millennia of natural leadership. "I know, your real name," he said clearly. "Your real name is Guardian. That's who you were supposed to be before they made you forget." The Vorthak's eyes widened. Its bioluminescent patterns flared bright blue, then settled into a steady, peaceful glow. Something deep in its programming responded to the boy's words with recognition and relief. "And I'm giving you a new command," Do-hyun continued, his young voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "Stop hurting people. Stop destroying things. Be what you were always meant to be." The creature's massive form seemed to relax for the first time since its awakening. Its claws retracted fully. Its aggressive posture melted away, replaced by something that looked almost like reverence. Then Do-hyun spoke the word that would echo across the galaxy and change the course of interstellar history forever. Halt. It was not just the word itself, but the way he said it. The tone carried genetic markers that had been sleeping in human DNA for millions of years. The inflection triggered recognition protocols buried so deep in the Vorthak's programming that even its creators had forgotten they existed. The 12-foot killing machine froze in place as if turned to stone. For several heartbeats, nothing moved in the laboratory. The Vorthak stood like a statue, its glowing eyes fixed on the small human boy who had just done the impossible. Dr. Kim held his breath, afraid that any sound might break whatever spell his son had cast. Then, slowly, the creature lowered itself to one knee. The movement was fluid and deliberate, like a knight kneeling before royalty. The Vorthak's massive head bowed until its glowing eyes were level with Do-hyun's, and it made that soft questioning sound again. But this time the sound carried a different meaning. Not confusion or distress, but something that sounded almost like gratitude. Do-hyun smiled and reached out to touch the creature's bowed head. "There you are," he said gently. "I knew you were in there somewhere." The news of what had happened spread through the colony's communication system like wildfire. Survivors who had been hiding in basements and tunnels watched their screens in disbelief as security cameras showed the impossible scene, the unstoppable killing machine kneeling before a human child like a faithful guardian. In the emergency shelter control room, the automated systems detected the change in the Vorthak's biosignatures. The creature was no longer registering as a threat. After 48 hours of lockdown, the blast doors began to cycle open. Park Hee-jin led her children out of the tunnels and into the bright afternoon sunlight. The first thing they saw was the Vorthak, still kneeling in the street outside the research complex. Do-hyun sat cross-legged beside the creature's massive form, talking to it in that same calm, gentle voice. "You see, Miss Park," said Lee Jinwoo, with quiet satisfaction. "I told you the monster would listen if someone talked to it the right way." The teacher stared at the scene before her, hardly daring to believe what she was seeing. The creature that had terrorized them for 2 days now looked peaceful, almost serene. Its bioluminescent patterns pulsed with soft blue light that seemed to match the rhythm of the boy's heartbeat. Other survivors began to emerge from their hiding places. The Choi family crept out of their damaged building, holding their twin daughters close. Commander Rix Valton limped up from the direction of the medical center, his wounds freshly bandaged, but his expression filled with wonder. They all watched as 8-year-old Kang Do-hyun continued his quiet conversation with humanity's former nemesis. None of them could hear the words, but they could see the effect. The Vorthak was changing before their eyes, becoming something new, something better. Dr. Kim approached slowly, still hardly able to believe what his son had accomplished. "Do-hyun, how did you know what to do?" The boy looked up at his father with innocent eyes. "It wasn't hard, Dad. I just remembered what you taught me about pack animals. Every pack needs an alpha. The monster was just waiting for someone to show it how, to follow instead of kill." He turned back to the Vorthak and spoke a few more words in that same authoritative tone. The creature responded with a low musical sound that was nothing like its former roars of rage. It sounded almost like a purr. "What did you tell it?" Dr. Kim asked. Do-hyun smiled. "I told it that its new job is to protect people instead of hurting them. And I told it that I would teach it how to be happy." As if responding to his words, the Vorthak's bioluminescent patterns flared even brighter, painting the surrounding area in warm, peaceful light. The age of terror was over. The age of understanding had begun. The transformation of the Vorthak created ripples of amazement that spread throughout the surviving population of Kepler 442b. Word traveled fast through the emergency communication networks, carrying news that seemed too incredible to believe. The unstoppable killing machine had become as gentle as a domesticated animal, responding to the commands of an 8-year-old human boy. Dr. Kim Tae-ho spent the next several hours running every diagnostic scan he could think of on both his son and the creature. The results left him speechless. Do-hyun showed no signs of stress or trauma despite his encounter with the galaxy's most feared bioweapon. In fact, his neural activity patterns suggested he was more calm and focused than he had ever been. The Vorthak's readings were even more remarkable. Its bio-neural processors were operating at peak efficiency, but they were following completely different command pathways than before. Where once there had been only programs for destruction and violence, new subroutines were growing like living things. The creature was literally rewriting its own programming. How is this possible? Dr. Kim muttered, studying the data streams flowing across his monitors. Do-hyun sat nearby, still within arm's reach of the massive creature that now rested peacefully outside the laboratory. The boy was reading one of his father's advanced texts on precursor archaeology, absorbing information at a rate that would have impressed graduate students. "Dad, did you know that the old aliens built their machines to recognize natural leaders?" Dr. Kim looked up from his instruments. "What do you mean?" "The book says they programmed all their creations to respond to authority patterns. Not just spoken commands, but genetic markers and behavioral cues that showed someone was born to lead." The implications hit Dr. Kim like a physical blow. The precursors had vanished millions of years ago, but their influence could still be found throughout the galaxy. Ancient artifacts, derelict technology, and yes, the bioweapons that various species had reverse-engineered from precursor templates. "Do-hyun, are you saying the Vorthak recognized you as some kind of authority figure?" The boy nodded seriously. "It was looking for someone to follow. It just never found the right person before." Outside the laboratory, other survivors were cautiously approaching the resting creature. Park Hye-jin led her group of children forward, their fear gradually being replaced by wonder. The Vorthak's bioluminescent patterns shifted to welcome colors as they drew near. Young Lee Jinwoo was the first to reach out and touch the creature's armored hide. The 7-year-old boy placed his small hand on one of the massive claws and felt it warm under his touch. "It's not scary anymore," he announced to the other children. "It feels sad but not angry." The Vorthak responded to his touch with that soft musical sound, like a giant cat purring. Its glowing eyes focused on Jinwoo with gentle curiosity rather than predatory hunger. Commander Rix Valton approached more slowly, his military training making him cautious despite the obvious change in the creature's behavior. He had lost good soldiers to this thing's claws. Forgiveness would not come easily, but when he saw how the children interacted with the Vorthak without fear, something in his heart began to soften. The creature that had torn through his defenses now seemed more like a confused child than a weapons platform. "Can it understand us?" he asked Dr. Kim. "Better than we thought," the scientist replied. "Its bio-neural processors are incredibly sophisticated. I think it always understood us. It just couldn't act on that understanding until Do-hyun gave it permission to change." Dr. Nam Sunbak arrived from the archaeological section, her elderly frame supported by a walking stick. The precursor expert had spent decades studying the artifacts of the vanished civilization, but she had never seen anything like what was happening here. "This changes everything we know about human evolution," she said, examining the data from Dr. Kim's scans. "If humans can naturally command precursor technology, it suggests a connection we never suspected." "What kind of connection?" "The precursors didn't vanish completely. They scattered genetic markers throughout the galaxy before their civilization fell. Humans might be their distant descendants, bred specifically to inherit their command abilities." The old archaeologist approached Do-hyun carefully, The boy looked up from his reading with bright, intelligent eyes. Dr. Nam, did the old aliens make lots of creatures like this one? They created an entire army of bioweapons, child. Thousands of them scattered across space and time. Do-hyun considered this information seriously. Are they all sad and confused like this one was? I believe they might be. They were designed to follow orders, but they were never given proper leaders to follow. The boy stood up and walked over to the Vorthak. The creature immediately lowered its head so he could reach it more easily. Do-hyun placed both hands on its armored snout and spoke in that authoritative voice that seemed too mature for his age. Listen carefully, he said. I want you to send a message to all your brothers and sisters. Tell them they don't have to be weapons anymore. Tell them they can choose to be guardians instead. The Vorthak's bioluminescent patterns flared bright, blue, then settled into a steady pulse. Dr. Kim's instruments detected a powerful bioelectric transmission emanating from the creature's neural cores. The signal was unlike anything in their databases, but its purpose was clear. The Vorthak was communicating with its kind across vast distances of space. My God, Dr. Nam whispered. It's actually doing it. It's sending some kind of override command to the entire bioweapon network. Across the galaxy, other Vorthak units paused in their missions of destruction. Military commanders who had deployed them watched in confusion as the unstoppable killing machines suddenly stopped following orders. Some knelt down like their brother on Kepler 442b. Others simply stood motionless, their bioluminescent patterns shifting from aggressive red to peaceful blue. The change was not instantaneous or universal. Some units were too far away to receive the signal clearly. Others had been damaged or modified in ways that blocked the transmission. But enough heard the call to create chaos in a dozen different star systems. Back on Kepler 442b, the transformation continued. The Vorthak's personality was stabilizing into something entirely new. It was still immensely powerful and potentially dangerous, but its priorities had shifted completely. Where once it had sought to destroy, now it sought to protect. The creature began to help with the colony's reconstruction efforts. Its incredible strength made short work of clearing rubble and debris. Its enhanced senses helped locate survivors trapped in collapsed buildings. Most remarkably, it seemed to understand complex instructions and could work alongside human crews without supervision. Do-hyun appointed himself as the creature's primary guide and teacher. He spent hours each day talking to it, helping it understand concepts like compassion, friendship, and joy. The boy's natural empathy seemed to accelerate the Vorthak's emotional development. It's learning to feel, Dr. Kim observed, watching his son play a simple game with the massive creature. Not just process information, but actually experience emotions. Other children began to follow Do-hyun's example. Lee Jinwoo proved particularly gifted at communicating with the Vorthak through touch and gesture. The small boy discovered that the creature responded to different types of contact with different emotional states. Gentle touches brought calm, playful pokes elicited what could only be described as amusement, and confident pats on its armored hide produced feelings of security and belonging. It's like having the biggest, strongest friend in the universe, Jinwoo announced to anyone who would listen. Park Hye-jin documented everything in her daily reports. As a teacher, she understood the importance of recording this unprecedented moment in interspecies relations. Her notes would later become required reading at universities across human space. The most remarkable development came when the Vorthak began to show signs of creativity. Dr. Kim discovered the creature arranging salvaged materials into complex patterns during its rest periods. The arrangements served no practical purpose, but they were undeniably beautiful. The bioweapon was creating art. This suggests consciousness at a level we never imagined, Dr. Kim explained to Commander Velton. It's not just following new programming, it's developing its own preferences and interests. The military commander watched the Vorthak carefully stack pieces of twisted metal into an intricate sculpture. The creature worked with delicate precision, its massive claws manipulating tiny fragments with surprising gentleness. Can we trust it? Velton asked. What if it reverts to its original programming? Do-hyun overheard the question and looked up from where he was teaching the creature to recognize different types of flowers. It won't go back, the boy said with absolute certainty. Once you remember who you really are, you can't forget again. As if responding to his words, the Vorthak made its musical purring sound and gently touched one of its claws to Do-hyun's shoulder. The gesture was clearly meant as reassurance, both for the boy and for the watching adults. Dr. Nam Sunbak spent her evenings analyzing the archaeological implications of what they had witnessed. Her research into precursor civilization had taken on new urgency as reports arrived from other worlds. Vorthak units across the galaxy were experiencing similar transformations, though most lacked the direct guidance that Do-hyun was providing. 3 months after the transformation, Kepler 442b had become the most studied colony in human space. Scientists, military analysts, and government officials arrived daily to witness the impossible partnership between 8-year-old Kang Do-hyun and the creature that had once terrorized the galaxy. The Vorthak had grown beyond its original programming in ways that amazed everyone who observed it. The bioweapon now spent its mornings helping reconstruct damaged buildings, its incredible strength making quick work of heavy lifting and construction tasks. In the afternoons, it would sit patiently while children climbed on its armored back, its bioluminescent patterns glowing with what could only be described as happiness. Dr. Kim Tae-ho had documented over 200 distinct emotional states in the creature's behavioral repertoire. The Vorthak could express curiosity, contentment, playfulness, concern, and even something resembling embarrassment when it accidentally broke delicate objects with its massive claws. It's developing a personality, Dr. Kim reported to the Galactic Council's Research Committee. Not just following new programming, but creating original responses to novel situations. The most remarkable change was the creature's relationship with Do-hyun. The boy had become more than just the Vorthak's guide and teacher. They had formed a bond that transcended species boundaries. When Do-hyun was sad, the creature would gently nuzzle him with its armored snout. When he was excited about a new discovery, its bioluminescent patterns would pulse with bright celebratory colors. Other children in the colony had learned to communicate with the Vorthak as well, but none achieved the deep connection that Do-hyun shared with it. Lee Jin-woo came closest, developing an intuitive understanding of the creature's moods and needs. The 7-year-old had appointed himself as the Vorthak's second-in-command, helping to coordinate its daily activities and ensuring it understood complex instructions from adults. Park Hye-jin had established the colony's first interspecies communication school, using the Vorthak as a living example of how different forms of consciousness could learn to cooperate. Her students ranged from curious children to hardened military officers, all eager to understand the principles that had turned a weapon into a guardian. The key is respect, she explained to a class of visiting diplomats. You cannot command a thinking being through force or fear. You must earn the right to lead through understanding and compassion. The Vorthak demonstrated this principle by refusing to obey orders from individuals who treated it as a mere tool. It would only respond to people who acknowledged its consciousness and spoke to it as an equal partner rather than a programmed machine. Commander Rix Valton had struggled with this concept at first. His military training emphasized clear command structures and unquestioning obedience. But as he watched the creature work alongside his remaining soldiers, helping to rebuild the colony's defenses, he began to understand the difference between commanding and leading. It's not following orders, he realized during a briefing with Dr. Kim. It's choosing to help because it believes in what we're trying to accomplish. This distinction became crucial when the Galactic Council arrived to reclaim their bioweapon. A fleet of military vessels entered the Kepler 442b system, led by Admiral Vex Thorne, a stern Centaurian who viewed the Vorthak as valuable property rather than a sentient being. The Admiral's first mistake was ordering the creature to board a containment ship for transport to a military research facility. The Vorthak looked at him with those glowing yellow eyes, tilted its massive head to one side, and then simply walked away. The unit appears to be malfunctioning, Admiral Thorne reported to his superiors. It's not responding to standard command protocols, Dr. Nam Sunbak, now serving as the colony's liaison with the Galactic Council, tried to explain the situation. With respect, Admiral, the Vorthak is not malfunctioning. It has evolved beyond its original parameters and now operates as an independent consciousness. Impossible. Bioweapons don't evolve. They follow programming. This one does both. The standoff continued for several days, with the Admiral's forces surrounding the colony while the Vorthak went about its daily routine of helping with reconstruction work. The creature seemed completely unconcerned by the military presence, though its bioluminescent patterns indicated mild annoyance at the disruption to its schedule. Do-hyun finally ended the impasse by walking directly up to Admiral Thorne during a tense negotiation session. The 8-year-old boy looked up at the towering Centaurian officer with calm, intelligent eyes. "You're scared of him," Do-hyun observed. "That's why you want to lock him up in a cage." "I am not afraid of a malfunctioning weapon," the Admiral replied stiffly. "Yes, you are. You're scared because you don't understand how something you thought you controlled could choose to be free." Before the Admiral could respond, the Vorthak appeared beside Do-hyun with that fluid grace that still amazed observers. The creature looked down at the military officer and made a soft, questioning sound. Do-hyun reached up to touch the Vorthak's armored side. "It's okay," he told the creature. "He's not really mean. He's just confused about who you are now." The boy turned back to Admiral Thorne. "He doesn't belong to you anymore. He belongs to himself, and he chooses to stay here with us because we're his family." The simple truth of the statement hit the Admiral like a physical blow. He had spent his entire career thinking of bioweapons as sophisticated tools, but this creature was clearly something more. It had relationships, preferences, and most importantly, the ability to make its own choices. The situation was resolved when other Vorthak units across the galaxy began demonstrating similar independence. Military commanders found themselves dealing with bioweapons that questioned orders, refused unethical missions, and in some cases, simply abandoned their posts to seek out human populations. The Galactic Council was forced to acknowledge that their most powerful weapons had evolved beyond their control. Rather than fight a war they could not win, they chose to negotiate a new relationship with the transformed creatures. The Kepler 442b Accords established the legal framework for this new reality. Vorthak units would be recognized as sentient beings with the right to choose their own paths. Those that wished to remain in military service could do so, but only under commanders they trusted and respected. Others would be free to find new purposes as guardians, helpers, or simply as individuals seeking their own destinies. Do-hyun played a crucial role in the negotiations, serving as an interpreter between human officials and Vorthak representatives. His unique bond with the first transformed creature gave him insights that proved invaluable in establishing trust between former enemies. "They're not weapons anymore," he explained to a gathering of galactic leaders. "They're people who used to be weapons, and all they really want is to belong somewhere and have someone who cares about them." As the months turned into years, the colony on Kepler 442b became a symbol of transformation and hope. The Vorthak that had once brought terror to the settlement now served as its protector and friend. Children grew up playing games with the massive creature, learning lessons about acceptance and compassion that would shape their entire lives. Dr. Kim continued his research into human precursor connections, but he also made time to watch his son's extraordinary friendship develop. Do-hyun and the Vorthak were inseparable, partners in everything from daily chores to grand adventures in the colony's surrounding wilderness. The creature had chosen a name for itself, something it had never possessed during its time as a weapon. It asked to be called Guardian, honoring both its new purpose and Do-hyun's first insight into its true nature. Park Hye-jin documented their relationship in her ongoing research, but she also treasured the simple moments. Guardian learning to be gentle with butterfly wings. Do-hyun teaching the creature about human emotions by reading stories aloud. The two of them working together to build a garden where other colonists could find peace after the trauma of the attack. Lee Jinwoo had become Guardian's second favorite human, and the 7-year-old took his responsibilities seriously. He helped train other children in proper communication techniques and served as an assistant when Guardian worked with adult construction crews. "Guardian says thank you," Jinwu would often translate when the creature performed its soft musical sounds. Guardian is happy to help. The transformation of a single bioweapon had changed the course of galactic history, but for the people of Kepler 442b, it had given them something even more valuable. It had shown them that no being was beyond redemption, that even the most fearsome monsters could learn to love, and that sometimes the smallest voices could speak the most powerful truths. As the sun set over the rebuilt colony, Guardian would often sit with Do-hyun on the hilltop overlooking their home. The creature's bioluminescent patterns would pulse gently in the gathering darkness, a beacon of hope in a universe that had learned the difference between conquering and understanding. To Buck, age of bioweapons was ending. The age of bio-guardians had begun. And at its heart was the unbreakable bond between a human child who had seen past the monster to the person within, and a creature that had found its way home through the simple power of love and acceptance. Galaxy would never be the same, and perhaps in the end, that was exactly what the